Hey friends, Detective Brooks here. Stephanie Flores, an ambitious 21-year-old girl, set off on May 30, 2010 for a prestigious poker tournament at the Atlanta City Casino in Lima, the capital of Peru. Stephanie was confident in her chances of winning. Before leaving, she assured her father that she would return home in a couple of days, but this trip turned out to be fatal. Stephanie never returned. Stephanie lived with her father, Ricardo Flores, a well-known race car driver and presidential candidate in Peru. Their family was highly respected in society. The family had 5 children, 4 sons and the only daughter Stephanie, who was the youngest and the darling of the entire family. Despite their high social status and significant position, all members of the Flores family were humble and friendly people who valued a simple life. Stephanie's 4 brothers were engaged in organizing various events, and the girl herself, being a third-year student at the University of Lima with a degree in business administration, worked part-time with them. In addition to studying and work, Stephanie was fond of gambling, which brought her a considerable income. When Stephanie did not return home after the poker tournament, her father Ricardo became worried, as this was completely out of character for his responsible daughter. He asked his sons for help, but they also could not contact Stephanie. Then they started calling all her friends, but no one could provide any useful information about the girl's whereabouts. The brothers drove around the entire area looking for their sister, but to no avail. Eventually, Ricardo was forced to file a missing person report with the police. The police began their investigation at the hotel where the poker tournament was held. They interviewed the staff of the establishment, but no one knew where one of the participants had gone. Detectives decided to review the footage from the surveillance cameras and discovered that around 3 o'clock in the morning on May 30, Stephanie entered the conference room where the tournament was being held and sat down at a table next to a young man in light-colored clothing. They chatted nicely during the game and left the room together around 5 in the morning. Hotel employees confirmed that they had seen them together and described Stephanie's companion as a polite and pleasant young man who looked like Hollywood actor Brad Pitt. But where did this couple go after the tournament? The answer to this question was found on other surveillance camera footage. According to them, Stephanie and the stranger entered room 309, registered in the young man's name, at 5:16 a.m. After some time, the man left and returned with 2 cups of coffee and buns. And 3 hours and 20 minutes after their first visit to the room, he left again, taking his backpack with him, and did not return. Before leaving, he asked the hotel staff not to disturb the girl in the room, so no one bothered her until the police arrived. Detectives decided it was time to visit room 309 and check if the girl was okay. But what awaited them behind the door exceeded their worst fears. Opening the room, the police found themselves faced with the horrific scene. Stephanie Flores was lying dead in a pool of her own blood, brutally beaten to death. A tennis racket was seized from the room, which was likely used as the murder weapon. Experts determined that the girl died from a blow to the head with a blunt object, which caused a hemorrhage in the brain. She had a broken neck, traces of blood flowing from the left side of her head, from her ear and nose. There were also signs of strangulation and blunt trauma to the back of the head and lower neck area. Stephanie was fully clothed and lying on her back. There were no signs of sexual assault, so this motive was immediately dismissed. Investigators were faced with the question, if the murder was not sexually motivated, then what pushed the perpetrator to such a cruel act? Robbery seemed a likely reason, as all of Stephanie's money, credit cards, and jewelry had disappeared from the room. It is known that the girl had a large sum of cash with her, about $15,000, of which $10,000 she had won at the tournament, and another $5,000 her father had given her to buy a new laptop. After examining the crime scene, the detectives already had a prime suspect, the same young man from the surveillance camera footage. During the investigation, it was found out that room 309 was registered in the name of 22-year-old Dutchman Joran van der Sloot. The police decided to dig deeper into the identity of this young man and came across stunning facts from his biography. It turned out that van der Sloot was already on the international wanted list and was a suspect in the case of the disappearance of American student Natalee Holloway. The girl disappeared without a trace while vacationing on the island of Aruba on May 30, 2005. Exactly 5 years before the murder of Stephanie Flores. The alarming coincidences in dates and the similarity of circumstances led the investigation to assume that the Dutchman might be involved in other crimes as well. The capture of the dangerous killer became a priority for Peruvian law enforcement, so they put van der Sloot on the wanted list and threw all their efforts into searching for him. While the hunt for the Dutchman was underway, detectives decided to delve deeper into the case of missing Natalee Holloway to better understand the suspect's personality and possible motives. Here's what they managed to establish. Natalee Holloway was born on October 21, 1986 in Clinton, Mississippi, USA, and was the eldest child in the family. When the girl was 7 years old, her parents divorced, and the children stayed with their mother, although they maintained a warm relationship with their father. At the age of 14, Natalee moved with her family to the city of Mountain Brook in Alabama, where her mother entered into a second marriage with a wealthy businessman. The girl was an excellent student at school, was engaged in cheerleading and dancing. After graduating from high school with honors, Natalee received a full scholarship to the university. It seemed that brilliant prospects were opening up for her, but a fateful trip to the island of Aruba in May 2005 forever crossed out all her plans and dreams. Natalee Holloway, an 18-year-old high school graduate, set off on her dream vacation to the island of Aruba, a paradise corner of the Caribbean Sea that is part of the Netherlands. Aruba, along with other islands in the region, is known as the Dutch Caribbean and is famous for its safety and extremely low crime rate. The trip was organized by the school specifically for graduates who were celebrating the end of their studies. In May 2005, a group of 124 students and 11 teachers arrived on the island, full of enthusiasm and anticipation of an unforgettable adventure. The vacation was going perfectly. The group stayed at the luxurious Holiday Inn Hotel on an all-inclusive basis. On Aruba, alcohol consumption is allowed from the age of 18, so young people had the opportunity to fully enjoy exotic drinks. Each day was filled with carefree leisure. Vacationers enjoyed the beach, swimming in the crystal clear blue waters, lively conversations and jokes. After a hearty lunch, someone could afford a luxurious afternoon nap. In the evening, the whole company gathered for dinner, and then went to the casino or bar to taste various cocktails, including alcoholic ones. May 29, 2005 was the last day of the vacation. It was no different from the previous ones, except that everyone began packing their suitcases before departure. Natalee, like the rest, packed her things, put her passport next to her suitcase, and went to dinner. After the meal, some continued to have fun, while others returned to their rooms to get a good night's sleep before the morning flight. On the morning of May 30, students and teachers gathered in the lobby of the Holiday Inn Hotel to check out and head to the airport. But the teachers noticed the absence of one student. After checking the lists, they found that Natalee Holloway was missing. No one in the group knew where she could be. At first, the teachers assumed that the girl might have overslept and called her room, but there was no answer. Then they went to her room with a hotel employee and opened the door. To their surprise, Natalee was not there, although her suitcase with her belongings and passport remained in the room. The entire hotel staff and teachers started searching for the girl, scouring every corner of the property, but to no avail. Around 11 a.m., one of the teachers called Natalee's mother and reported the girl's disappearance. The woman asked if Natalee could have gone somewhere alone, but the mother was sure that her daughter would never have done that. She immediately suggested that the girl had been kidnapped. All students and teachers were in a state of shock at the time, as they knew Natalee as a very responsible person and understood that she could not have disappeared without a trace and not tell anyone. Something terrible must have happened to her. The teachers immediately contacted the police, reporting Natalee's disappearance, and continued the search together with law enforcement. Meanwhile, the rest of the students, along with several teachers, were forced to fly home. The missing girl's mother, gripped by panic and despair, immediately called her husband and Natalee's biological father, giving them the terrible news. Without wasting a minute, they all together took the first flight from a neighboring city and flew to Aruba, hoping to find their daughter as soon as possible. In addition, the woman sought help from 911 and the FBI, describing the situation to them in detail. As soon as they set foot on Aruban soil, Natalee's relatives immediately plunged into the search, questioning everyone who might have seen the girl at the hotel or resort. They handed out photos of the missing girl and actively cooperated with the investigation from the very beginning. During the investigation, a stunning discovery was made. Natalee did not spend the night in her hotel room on the night of her disappearance. Moreover, no one saw her at the hotel that night at all. However, some of her friends recalled seeing Natalee talking to a tall guy of European appearance, probably Dutch, in the casino adjacent to the hotel. They suggested that the girl could have gone somewhere with him. Casino security guards reported that around 1 o'clock in the morning, when the establishment was closing, they saw Natalee leave and get into a silver Honda with 3 young men. Employees recognized these guys, as they often visited the casino. They turned out to be 17-year-old Dutchman Joran van der Sloot, 21-year-old Deepak Kalpo, and his younger 18-year-old brother Satish Kalpo. After watching the surveillance camera footage, the police were convinced of the truthfulness of the guards' words. The footage clearly showed Natalee sitting at the same table with Joran, and then all four of them leaving the casino together. Some employees of the establishment described van der Sloot as a real womanizer who hunted for young wealthy female tourists in order to swindle money from them. At the time of the events, Joran was only 17 and lived in Aruba with his parents. The young man came from a well-to-do family. His father was a successful lawyer and was preparing to become a judge. Joran himself was considered a promising athlete, an excellent student, and everyone predicted a brilliant football career for him. But from his teenage years, he began to have problems with behavior. The young man became a regular at bars and casinos and excessively indulged in alcohol. All leads pointed to this Dutch youth, so Natalee's parents, along with the police, went to his house to interrogate him. The silver Honda, in which the missing girl was last seen, was parked near the house. Joran's father opened the door. When the police informed him of the suspicions against his son, the man replied that the young man had gone to the casino at another hotel. Law enforcement officers immediately went there, hoping to catch Joran, but he had already disappeared without a trace. While everyone was busy looking for the young Dutchman, his father called the police and reported that his son had just returned home with his friend Deepak. When the police arrived at the scene, they decided to immediately separate the young men and interrogate them separately. It turned out that their testimonies not only contradicted each other, but also constantly changed. At first, both claimed that they had never seen the missing girl at all. But when investigators showed them the surveillance footage, which clearly showed them communicating with Natalee, Joran suddenly remembered that he had indeed met her that evening. According to him, after playing at the casino, the girl asked him to go to a nightclub with her. Joran agreed and invited two friends, Deepak and his brother Satish. They got into the car together and went to the club, where they had a great time over cocktails and dancing. After that, according to the Dutchman, they drove Natalee back to the hotel and never saw her again. However, at the end of the conversation, Joran let slip that he saw a hotel security guard allegedly pestering the girl when she returned to her room. However, the police immediately realized that this version of events was a complete lie. They had already thoroughly studied all the surveillance camera footage and knew for certain that Natalee did not return to the hotel that night. Investigators repeatedly arrested the suspects for giving false testimony, but due to lack of evidence, they were released each time without charges being brought. During further interrogations, the young men changed their story. Now they claimed that after the nightclub, they all went together to the lighthouse to look at sharks, and then decided to take a walk on Arashi Beach. According to Joran, Natalee was so drunk that she could barely stand on her feet and kept falling, so he allegedly left her alone on the beach because the next morning he had to get up early for classes. The Dutchman assured that the girl did not mind, as she wanted to go all out on the last night. He allegedly had no idea what could have happened to her after he left. However, according to him, now, looking back, he deeply regretted leaving Natalee there alone, because it seemed to have led to her disappearance. Van der Sloot categorically denied having intimate relations with Natalee, claiming that there was only a kiss between them. On the other hand, his friends said that the Dutchman had actually had fun with the girl and then left her to fend for herself on the beach. The police thoroughly searched the beach in question, but found no trace of the missing girl. However, soon one of the gardeners of a neighboring hotel approached law enforcement with new information. The man reported that on the night Natalee disappeared, he saw Joran, Deepak, and Satish digging a hole near a pond in a vacant lot. Investigators immediately rushed to the specified location, even drained the pond, dug up the entire area, but found nothing suspicious. Weeks and then months passed, but no one was charged. Natalee remained missing. Her family expressed increasing dissatisfaction with the course of the investigation and accused the local police of incompetence. The girl's loved ones were convinced that Joran was involved in her disappearance and that he should have been pressured to confess. But the police never did that. The Holloway family even announced a reward of $100,000 for information about Natalee's whereabouts, and also promised $1 million to anyone who would help find her alive. Local residents began calling en masse, sharing their guesses and assumptions, in the hope of receiving the promised money. But all these leads turned out to be false. The police, in turn, accused the girl's parents of the fact that their initiative with the reward only harmed the investigation. because it forced the cops to be distracted by unnecessary leads. Meanwhile, Natalee's relatives did not stop trying to find their daughter. They put up posters, handed out flyers, and participated in search operations. The Aruban authorities felt incredible pressure from them, as the family demanded that someone be arrested immediately, although there was little evidence for this. During the investigation, Joran van der Sloot, Deepak, and Satish Kalpo even spent 3 weeks in custody. Local residents were already certain that the young men would be charged at any moment, but this never happened. Soon all three were released. Deepak and Satish were freed after 3 weeks. Joran spent 2 more months in prison. And then the Kalpo brothers told the police that Joran's father allegedly helped his son hide Natalee's body. The man was detained, but released after only 3 days, as no evidence was found against him. Later, van der Sloot's father, who worked as a lawyer, filed a lawsuit against the Aruban police for wrongful detention and won the case, receiving $40,000 in compensation. The disappearance of the American high school student gained incredible publicity in the United States media, which greatly worried the Aruban authorities, as the island lived off tourists from the USA. The case became so high profile largely due to the persistence of Natalee's parents, who did not stop demanding justice for their daughter and in every possible way tried to stir up the local police. However, Joran himself also added fuel to the fire. For hefty fees, he willingly participated in various talk shows on American television, where he talked about the details of his meeting with Natalee on that fateful night. The young man assured that he was only telling the truth and had nothing to do with the girl's disappearance. A year after the incident, van der Sloot returned to the Netherlands and continued his studies. In numerous interviews with local media, he claimed that they were trying to frame him, and time after time repeated his version of events. Allegedly, he left Natalee Holloway on the beach that night and went home, and therefore was not responsible for her disappearance. Together with a journalist, Joran even published a book about this case, where he detailed his story and proved his own innocence. The young man made a pretty penny on all this. Under pressure from the missing girl's parents, the Aruban police nevertheless dared to conduct searches in the van der Sloot's house and the surrounding area. Law enforcement officers thoroughly checked every nook and cranny, even dug up the yard, but found nothing that could shed light on Natalee's fate. The investigation of this case was under close attention of the media and the public in many countries of the world, especially in the USA, Aruba, and the Netherlands. Joran became a real media star. Interestingly, opinions about him were divided. Some considered him the main suspect in Holloway's disappearance, while others saw him as an innocent victim of slander. Meanwhile, van der Sloot continued to participate in various television shows. During one of them, unable to withstand the pressure of the hosts and the sharp questions of the audience, he threw a glass of drink right in the journalist's face. 3 years had passed since Natalee's disappearance when new details emerged in this case. One of the witnesses claimed that on that night, around 4 a.m., he saw Joran and his father near the pond. According to him, the young man ran up to a fast food restaurant, and a few minutes later the two men got into a red Jeep and drove away somewhere. Another lead was related to van der Sloot's ex-girlfriend. She told the police how one night Joran said something to her like, "Who knows, maybe now you're lying on the beach next to someone who is able to get rid of a corpse." The girl was horrified by these words and believed that an innocent person would never have said such a thing. But despite all these testimonies, suspicious coincidences, and changing statements of the suspects, the Aruban police never managed to find enough evidence to charge anyone. The cases against Joran van der Sloot, Deepak, and Satish Kalpo were closed. Investigators promised to reopen the proceedings only if new significant facts emerged. In the end, no one was ever charged in connection with the disappearance of Natalee Holloway. Joran seemed to be reveling in his impunity and infamous fame. And in 2008, something unexpected happened. A video appeared on the internet, made with a hidden camera, in which van der Sloot told journalists about the circumstances of Natalee's death. Allegedly, they had sex on the beach, and then the girl suddenly began to shake and lost consciousness. Then Joran asked his friends to help take her body out to sea by boat and dump it overboard. Later, another scandalous recording appeared on the web, in which van der Sloot literally gloated over the fact that Natalee's body was never found. "Otherwise I would have been fried," he bragged, hinting that someone had helped him cover up the traces of the crime. But most amazingly, all these revelations had no legal consequences for him. The Aruban police refused to accept his confession in front of a hidden camera as evidence, claiming that it was not enough for trial. Allegedly, without a body and physical evidence, it was impossible to hold Joran accountable. Investigators suggested that with his sensational statements, van der Sloot was simply trying to create scandalous fame for himself and make money. Therefore, he made up all these gruesome stories. For some time, Joran even underwent treatment in a psychiatric clinic, where he turned of his own free will, and soon he moved to Bangkok, the capital of Thailand. There, with the money earned from interviews and the sale of the book, the young man bought a small restaurant and set about developing his business. That same year, another journalist met with van der Sloot, who was then living in Thailand. In a conversation with her, Joran said that he had sold Natalee Holloway into sexual and shared the proceeds with the Kalpo brothers, who allegedly helped him in this scheme. He also admitted that he was involved in the transfer of Thai women to the Netherlands, where they too were destined to become sex slaves. According to him, he managed to earn up to $30,000 on each victim. However, as soon as the interview was over, van der Sloot called the journalist and stated that he was just joking. Such inadequate antics by Joran did not go unnoticed by the local authorities. After the interview, the Thai police took an interest in him in connection with the voiced information about human trafficking and began an investigation. To avoid trouble with the law, van der Sloot was forced to flee the country, abandoning his restaurant business and savings. However, he later managed to sell his establishment in Bangkok remotely. Shortly thereafter, Joran's father died of a heart attack. The young man took the loss very hard, feeling guilty for his father's untimely death. Due to a nervous breakdown, he again found himself in a psychiatric hospital. Accidentally, after being discharged, van der Sloot's financial situation became extremely difficult. Desperately in need of money, he came up with another insidious plan. In 2019, the Holloway family's lawyer reported that an anonymous person had contacted him and offered a deal. The unknown person demanded $250,000 for information about the location of Natalee's remains. At the same time, the criminal asked for $25,000 in advance. During the investigation, it turned out that none other than Joran van der Sloot was behind these messages. To expose the scammer, Natalee's father agreed to a meeting and brought the agreed amount to Aruba. During the conversation, Joran gave another version of the events of that fateful night. Allegedly, he and Natalee had a fight. He pushed her, and the girl, falling, hit her head on a stone and died instantly. And then Joran, together with his father, buried the body in the foundation of one of the houses. Van der Sloot insisted that everything happened by accident and he was not to blame for anything. He even showed the place where Natalee's body was allegedly hidden. But when the police checked his words, it turned out that this was another lie. The house that Joran was talking about was built even before the girl's disappearance, so her remains could not have ended up under it in any way. And shortly after the meeting, Natalee's father received an email from the blackmailer, in which he admitted that the story with the house was a fiction. In order to bring van der Sloot to justice, if not for murder, then at least for extortion and fraud, the Holloway family involved the FBI in the case. Finally, official charges were brought against the Dutchman. But as soon as Joran found out about this, he fled to Peru. It was there that the tragedy with Stephanie Flores occurred. On June 3, 2010, van der Sloot's ex-girlfriend called the police. She reported that the fugitive had just contacted her and asked to borrow money for a plane ticket. Thanks to this information, the cops managed to track down Joran. He was detained in Chile, where he had arrived from Peru in 2 taxis. He was just about to board a plane, but did not have time. During the arrest, the police noticed that the suspect's clothes were stained with blood. Obviously, while fleeing, he did not have time to change. Soon, Joran van der Sloot was extradited from Chile to Peru, where he was charged with the murder of Stephanie Flores. At the very first interrogation by the police, the arrestee resolutely denied his guilt. According to his version, armed robbers burst into the hotel room, stole all the valuables, and shot the girl, and he allegedly managed to escape from the criminals alive. Joran explained the blood of Stephanie on his clothes by the shooting that took place in the room. But the police did not believe this story. Surveillance camera footage refuted the presence of armed robbers in the hotel. Moreover, none of the staff or guests heard any sounds of shooting. But most importantly, forensic experts established that Stephanie Flores died not from a bullet, but from a blow with a blunt object. So, 4 days after his arrest, van der Sloot nevertheless confessed to the crime. As Joran recounted, a friendly conversation struck up between him and Stephanie in the room. But suddenly he noticed that the girl, without permission, looked into his laptop, where a page was open with a mention of the disappearance of Natalee Holloway and van der Sloot's possible involvement in this. The young man rushed to convince Stephanie that all these suspicions were unfounded, that he was in no way connected with the Holloway case and was not to blame for anything. But the frightened girl did not believe him. She hit Joran in the face and rushed to the door, intending to escape. This attempt caused a fit of furious rage in him. The enraged Sloot attacked Stephanie. First, he hit her in the face with his elbow, breaking her nose. Then he grabbed the girl by the throat and began to strangle her. There was blood everywhere, including on his shirt. Then Joran took off his bloody shirt and threw it over Stephanie's face, pressing the fabric to her mouth. When the girl's body finally went limp and she stopped showing signs of life, the attacker came to his senses. According to Sloot, he deeply regretted what he had done and blamed alcohol and the actions of the victim herself, who allegedly provoked him. He said he feared that Stephanie would bring the police down on him, so he acted under the influence of emotions. He simply could not control himself and prevent the threat that the girl posed to him. However, investigators adhered to a simpler explanation. In their opinion, Joran could have killed Flores for selfish motives, since money and jewelry disappeared from the room. Realizing that he faced a severe sentence in Peru, Sloot tried to make a deal with the investigation. He offered to indicate the burial place of Natalee Holloway's remains in exchange for dropping the charges of Stephanie's murder. But the prosecutors refused to bargain. The trial of Joran Sloot in the case of the murder of Stephanie Flores went rather quickly, since all the evidence pointed to his guilt. The prosecution provided surveillance camera footage that captured the defendant entering the hotel room with the victim and a few hours later leaving it alone. Traces of the dead girl's blood were found on Joran's wrists and on Stephanie's body itself and on the murder weapon. Experts found the Dutchman's DNA. Sloot's lawyer understood the hopelessness of the situation, so she advised her client to plead guilty in exchange for leniency from the court. She hoped that in this way he would be able to get away with 15 years in prison. But despite the confession, Joran was sentenced to 28 years in prison. In addition, the court ordered him to pay compensation to the family of the deceased in the amount of $75,000. Dissatisfied with the severity of the sentence, Sloot later stated that he confessed to the murder under pressure from his defense counsel and the police, who allegedly forced him to take the blame. Also, during the hearings, it was decided that after serving his sentence in Peru, Joran would be extradited to the United States, where he would be tried for fraud and extortion of money from the Holloway family. In 2014, while behind bars, Sloot met a 33-year-old Peruvian citizen named Lady Figueroa. The woman made a living selling sweets and cigarettes to prisoners. A romantic relationship began between her and Joran, which soon grew into a marriage. The couple later even became parents to a girl, whom they named Trudy Sloot in honor of the convict's late grandmother. According to the rather liberal rules of the Peruvian penitentiary system, Figueroa could visit her husband twice a week. In interviews with the press, she described Joran as a kind and sensitive person. However, already in 2020, Sloot demanded a divorce. As it turned out, he had made the acquaintance of another woman, 24-year-old Eva. This young woman was involved in the smuggling of prohibited substances into the prison, which attracted Joran. When the prisoner's machinations became known, he was given an additional 7 years for the distribution of narcotic drugs. Also, Sloot was transferred to a more strict regime colony, where visits from relatives were prohibited. Since then, Joran has been maintaining relationships with Eva and other women only through correspondence. It is noteworthy that the Dutchman was never charged in the case of the missing Natalee Holloway. Her fate still remains unclear, although the family is convinced that it was Sloot who was involved in the girl's death. The residents of Aruba were convinced that 3 young men were involved in the disappearance of Natalee Holloway, Joran Sloot, and the brothers Deepak and Satish Kalpo. This company gained a dubious reputation as hunters for the money of wealthy American female tourists, whom they skillfully deceived. Joran was considered the leader in this trio because he spoke English fluently, had an attractive appearance, and knew how to establish contact with the opposite sex. The Kalpo brothers usually played the role of secondary assistants in his adventures. The family of the deceased Natalee is inclined to believe that the girl became a victim of just such a scam. Sloot probably planned to swindle money from her, but something went wrong. Perhaps Natalee refused to give up cash or valuables, so the robbery fell through. And during the quarrel, the irreparable happened: the girl died. Fearing responsibility, the criminals got rid of the body. Most likely, they threw the dead Natalee into the ocean to feed the sharks. However, it is possible that everything was much more sinister. and we are talking about the intentional murder of Miss Holloway. The suspicions of the deceased American's family only intensified after the terrible incident with Stephanie Flores. After all, the circumstances of these two tragedies are very similar. Joran met both girls in a casino, spent time with them, and then killed them. At first, the Peruvian authorities agreed to extradite Vander Sloot to the United States only after he had fully served his prison term for the murder of Stephanie. But in May, the Peruvian side changed its decision. They allowed Joran to be temporarily handed over to American justice, given the advanced age of the prosecution witnesses, who may not live to see the end of the Dutchman's sentence. As noted, this process should bring long-awaited peace to the life of the Holloway family, which grieves for Natalee in the same way as the Flores family does for Stephanie. Vander Sloot himself was categorically against extradition, and even tried to challenge this decision through a lawyer, referring to the fact that he was not notified about it in advance. However, his petition was rejected. At the end of May 2023, Joran was brutally beaten by other inmates in a Peruvian prison. In early June, FBI agents arrived to pick him up. To transport the suspect to the States, American law enforcement officers used one of their agency's official planes. On June 8, 2023, the aircraft with Vander Sloot on board landed in the USA. Joran was placed in a federal correctional facility in the city of Birmingham, located not far from the hometown of the missing Natalee Holloway. So far, there is no information about the exact date of the start of the trial in the Dutchman's case. The inhabitants of the island of Aruba were convinced that 3 young men were involved in the disappearance of Natalee Holloway, Joran Vander Sloot, and the brothers Deepak and Satish Kalpo. This company gained notoriety as hunters for the money of wealthy American female tourists, whom they skillfully deceived. Joran was considered the leader in this trio, since he spoke English fluently, had an attractive appearance, and knew how to establish contact with members of the opposite sex. The Kalpo brothers usually played the role of secondary assistants in his adventures. The family of the deceased Natalee tends to believe that the girl became a victim of just such a scam. Probably, Vander Sloot planned to swindle money from her, but something went wrong. Perhaps Natalee refused to give away cash or valuables, so the robbery fell through. And during the quarrel, the irreparable happened: the girl died. Fearing responsibility, the criminals got rid of the body. Most likely, they threw the dead Natalee into the ocean to feed the sharks. However, it is possible that everything was much more sinister, and we are talking about the intentional murder of Miss Holloway. The suspicions of the American victim's family only intensified after the terrible incident with Stephanie Flores. After all, the circumstances of these two tragedies are very similar. Joran met both girls in a casino, spent time with them, and then killed them. Initially, the Peruvian authorities agreed to extradite Vander Sloot to the United States only after he had fully served his prison term for the murder of Stephanie. But in May, the Peruvian side changed its decision. They allowed Joran to be temporarily handed over to the American justice system, given the advanced age of the prosecution witnesses who may not live long enough to see the end of the Dutchman's sentence. As noted, this process should bring long-awaited peace to the lives of the Holloway family, who grieve for Natalee in the same way as the Flores family does for Stephanie. Vander Sloot himself was categorically against extradition and even tried to challenge this decision through a lawyer, citing the fact that he was not notified about it in advance. However, his petition was rejected. At the end of May 2023, Joran was brutally beaten by other inmates in a Peruvian prison. In early June, FBI agents arrived to take him into custody. To transport the suspect to the States, American law enforcement officers used one of their agency's official planes. On June 8, 2023, the aircraft with Vander Sloot on board landed in the USA. Joran was placed in a federal correctional facility in the city of Birmingham, located not far from the hometown of the missing Natalee Holloway. Currently, there is no information about the exact date of the start of the trial proceedings in the Dutchman's case. That's all for now. Thank you for your attention.